is Face the Facts with NBC Connecticut.
Welcome back. An aging, failing power grid, the high cost of living, sagging test scores in our schools, all things Republican Ryan Fazio says needs to be fixed in Connecticut. Well, now he'll get his chance to work on some of the solutions in Hartford. Fazio was sworn in Thursday as a state senator in the 36th district, which covers Greenwich, Stamford, and New Canaan. He won a special election after Democrat Alex Kasser stepped down. He joins me now to talk about some of these goals. Mr. Fazio, Senator Fazio, welcome to Face the Facts.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, in the past, you've been critical of state Democrats for how they handled our contracts with our utility companies. Your district was also among the hardest hit by Tropical Storm Isaias last summer, some without power in New Canaan for more than a week. Now the utility company is paying some fines, foregoing some profits as a penalty. Are we in a better place of holding them accountable, do you think?
We might be, just because of the turn in public opinion against the utilities in the past year. But our utility costs for the average family, especially middle class and working class families, are still too high. I view that as a regressive tax. We still have the highest electricity costs in the lower 48 in our country. And I don't see a clear plan to reduce those costs. Certainly the utility should be focused on distribution and transmission primarily, rather than generation. And you've seen their monopoly expand vertically into electricity generation, which strikes me as a conflict of interest. But I think our state government, in addition to reliability of the electricity grid, also needs to be focused on reducing cost as well.
Under the new leadership at PURA, the regulatory agency, it seems as if they're doing a more vigorous job on trying to hold them accountable. Were we better prepared for the storm this time around, although it was a much smaller storm?
Probably. Listen, vegetation management is very important, especially in a state with as many trees as Connecticut. So making sure that trees aren't infringing too much on power and transmission lines is a top priority. We should be having crews and technology deployed in order to do that on a regular basis. I think generally, again, the public opinion against Eversource in particular probably alerted the company, certainly in addition to the government. But these are closely regulated utilities, and we also should be able to hold our politicians accountable and our government accountable, who's presided over a utility that's been able to get to this point over many years as well.
So the cost of living in Connecticut is very high for many middle-class families. That can be addressed from many angles. Right now, if you own a small business in Connecticut, say with 20 employees or fewer, health care coverage for a family of 4 can be equivalent to a mortgage payment. How can we possibly make that more affordable? The public option was a non-starter for lawmakers this time around.
Yes, well, this is a good question and a very important question. And as you pointed out, it's a question, a concern that I hear often from small business owners I talk to. I think we need to improve competition and choice on the health insurance side, which is something that Senator Kelly and Senate Republicans have talked a lot about recently and have very good ideas about. I'd also like to bring more ideas on the health care side, improving regulations in order to increase access, increase competition amongst healthcare providers in Connecticut. I think that Connecticut should be made a hub of healthcare provision and innovation in our country. We already have a huge amount of health insurers in the country, but we should also make the healthcare side itself central in Connecticut. We can do that by improving regulations. Many of those regulations were actually waived by the governor himself when he had executive powers early in the pandemic. So things like certificate of need laws, reciprocal licensing with healthcare providers across state lines if the other states have adequate standards for care, telemedicine and out-of-state telemedicine. These things were made temporary under the governor's executive powers during COVID because we wanted to increase healthcare access during a time of heavy demand. Well, if we wanted to do it then, we should do it permanently because they increase access, they reduce cost. Other states' reforms have shown the way in this regard. I think this has to be a top priority, and it's an issue where I think Republicans and Democrats can find common ground.
Last question. How do we address the inequities in schools so everyone gets a better chance to succeed? Greenwich Public Schools, where you attended, and the neighboring towns, taxpayers spend between $18,000 and $22,000 per student, just 12 students in the class. Bridgeport, 20 miles down the road, is near the bottom at $14,000 per student, still above the national average, but double the class size. How can we level that playing field so kids can succeed?
Well, I think there needs to be adequate funding for our schools. There's a school on the west side of Stamford that whose story is close to my heart. It's called the Stamford Charter School for Excellence. It's one of the best schools in the entire state, but it never gets the fanfare that it deserves. If it is its own standalone elementary school district, it would have the second highest test scores in the state after New Canaan and before Westport. That's despite the fact that I think 75% of the kids are free and reduced lunch. So low-income families, I think there's only three white kids in the entire school of about 330 kids. This is a fantastic, fantastic school, but it's funded less than $5,000 per pupil than the average public school in the city of Stamford. When it asked the State Department of Education to expand to sixth grade to provide great education for even more kids, it was denied that privilege. I think we need to look at what works and expand what works and use those examples as leaders in our state. With the resources that Connecticut generally spends on education, I think it's the second highest per pupil in the entire country. There's no reason we shouldn't have the best schools in the entire country. I think we have good schools, but we can do better. And we should do that by raising standards across the board, ensuring there's a very high quality of curriculum, and ensuring that leaders in education, like the Stamford Charter School for Excellence, are given support and are used as leaders, as examples for the entire state, not actually suppressed for their innovation.
Senator Fazio, we have to leave it there from Greenwich. Thanks so much for your perspective and joining us on Face the Facts this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Skyrocket.